want to call this Tuesday, May 15, 2018, special meeting of the Lake Lure Town Council into session, and ask that all please rise for an invocation. Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we gather here today to do the business of the citizens of Lake Lure. We ask for your divine guidance and support in doing what's best for our town and its citizens. We ask that you give us guidance as we go forward, and that we do this in your name. Amen. 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 We'll say the pledge.
I pledge
allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, please be seated. First item of business will be the adoption of the agenda. We have a very simple agenda today. We have a public comment period, followed by the budget presentation, and finally adjournment. Is there a motion to adopt this agenda?
Well, before we do so, do we want to add on after the budget presentation, do we want to discuss a follow-on special meeting once we've had time to review it? Because we normally meet with department heads and fire departments. Do we want to go ahead and
add an agenda item in there? As agenda item 5, a new 5 then, and then make 5, 6?
Yeah.
Okay.
Try to pick out the date for that new special meeting.
That would be good.
So.
Placeholder? Good. Would you like to make that motion?
I did.
Okay. Second?
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion? If none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. So we have a public comment. Unless David wants to comment, we won't have any public comment, further comment, and that would move us into the main item on our agenda, which is the 2018-2019 budget presentation by our town manager, Ron Nally. Ron, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, before we get started, I just want to say a couple of comments. When we first started putting this budget together, I had no idea that I'd end up presenting to you what I am going to present to you today. We had was actually working really hard yesterday afternoon to try to come up with some alternatives for you. Some of those worked out, some of them didn't, but what I'm going to present to you is sort of just where we are right now, and I'm sort of looking for the guidance from the board from here on out. So I'll go ahead and get the legal qualifications out of the way. So I'm going to read from page 2, if you'll just follow along. Submitted for your approval is the Town of Lake Lure budget for the 2018-2019 fiscal year in the amount of $25,559,900. I will say that don't let that number scare you, because $5 million of that is dam repair loan proceeds, and $12.5 million is the loan proceeds from the sewer system. So if you want to subtract about $13 million, that's what your normal budget would be. The budget process that was conducted this year began with informal, formal discussions with board members, agencies, department heads. From those discussions, goals and objectives were developed and funding priorities established. The total recommended budget for fiscal year 18-19 is $25.6 million roughly. The tax rate necessary to fund this budget is 0.403. That's a rate of increase of about almost 13 cents. The budget is balanced and prepared in accordance with the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act and in accordance with Local Government Commission guidelines. I believe that the data is presented is accurate in all material aspects, and it's in a manner designed to set forth fairly the financial position and results of the operation of the town. The report is divided into 6 sections: the introduction, policy document, financial plan, operations guide, capital improvements, and glossary. The introduction section contains the budget message and information about our organization and principal officials. The policy document gives a coherent statement of the organizational-wide financial and programmatic policies and goals. The financial plan describes all the funds that are subject to appropriations, as well as a summary of revenues and expenditures. And the operation guide describes the activities, services, and functions carried out by each department. And I always tell people at this point, if you really want to know where your money is spent, your tax money, spend most of your time in the operation guide, because that, again, will tell you line item by line item where the money comes in and where it goes. Over the next year, as y'all well know, we have several events that are going to have a significant impact on this budget in this town. Those include of course, the state of our national and state economy, the funding of our capital projects, which is a huge piece of this budget presentation, operational increases, and employee benefit costs. Features in the budget take into account the effects of each of these events and the impact it will have on service delivery and costs, and every effort has been made to balance the need for service delivery with a fiscally conservative approach to revenue and expenditure estimates. The general fund is our general operating fund. As y'all know, it accounts for all the financial resources except those that are required to be in our enterprise fund, which is our business funds. The primary revenue source are ad valorem taxes and state shared revenues. Expenditures include public safety, administration, public works, recreation, and community enhancement. General fund revenues budgeted this fiscal year total $6.12 million. It's an increase of approximately 18.4%, or about $953,000. POW bill, as you know, the gas tax is used for POW bill revenues. The POW bill funds are expected to increase slightly to about $68,900. We have two enterprise funds, the water fund and the electric fund. Operating revenues for the water and sewer fund are budgeted at $13,722,500. It amounts or represents an amount of about $12,500 or a 1,026% increase in revenues. And again, that's based primarily on your water and sewer project, or I'm sorry, your sewer replacement project. After backing out the loan proceeds of about $12.5 million, your charge for service represents 96% of your water and sewer revenues. We have budgeted $545,000 for debt service payments and $12.5 million in capital outlay. In your electric fund, the electric fund is budgeted at just over $5 million. Without considering transfers or loan proceeds, the amount represents $66,000 or a 20% increase in revenues budgeted from last fiscal year. Charges for service only account for $1,000. $5.1 million in capital outlay has been allocated, as well as $368,000 in new debt service payments for the dam repair. I feel that this recommendation is a responsible budget with priorities receiving funding based on your input and direction. The budget fulfills obligations that either this board has made or legal obligations imposed by other levels of government. The 2018-2019 recommended budget is hereby respectfully submitted for your review and consideration. Now, what I tried to do, again, was take a look at revenue and expenditures, how to present that fairly to you. It became difficult because, as y'all know, we have not had a tax increase roughly since 2012. We have had operational increases in benefits, employee costs, also operational costs. There are certain things in this budget that are going to be required, and that's primarily found in your electric fund. We do not have enough revenue to support the repair of the dam without some tax increase. So while I presented a 12-cent tax increase, know that roughly 3 cents will likely be required. It's not a matter if there's a tax increase, but for the board to decide roughly how much. We have several things in this budget that have a significant impact on that tax increase proposal, and what I've done is outlaid these for you. All of these I did not feel comfortable enough going through and either subtracting out ahead of time or revising, because they're all projects that either you individually or together collectively as a board has brought to the table. And so I felt it was only right to include those as a total and find the revenue in order to fund those. And now it'll be your responsibility to decide which projects are important enough to carry forward into the next fiscal year. So I'm going to cover those for you. Oh, and one thing, I just want you to know we did not take this lightly. I think all department heads, if you look at your operational budget, are either right at or below last year's budget. So the department heads realized the seriousness of what we're proposing and has come together to try to present to you a reasonable budget. So let me cover these with you real quick. You will note that there are 4 new positions, 3 full-time and 1 part-time position that's being proposed in your budget. The descriptions are in the front pocket of your budget book. We are proposing a civil engineer / project manager position. As you know, we have 2 very, very large projects that are coming up with the dam and with the sewer project. And there is some thought that with the amount of money that we have spent locally on engineering services, that for the next, say, 3 to 5 years, we could actually hire that position in-house and save money through our engineering services contracts. Now, again, we can't tie that down specifically to how much savings that would be, because, again, that's all negotiated. But we do feel that there are savings associated with the hiring of this position.
Regarding that one, and for the next meeting, could you pick out one project where the engineering is still, example, we for the marina and boardwalk project.
Right.
Okay, we've already allocated so much money for that. Could we somehow try to figure out approximately what that would cost going this route with this added into the picture as opposed to what we've already budgeted?
We can certainly try.
Just that one example for the next meeting.
Yes, sir. Yep.
That would help, I think.
The second position that is being proposed.
Ron,
Sorry.
one more question. So that's, we're talking about, for that civil engineer, actually hiring a person to put on staff, not to
Right.
contract with someone.
That's correct.
To do it.
That's correct.
And the advantage to that is?
The advantage is that for the next 3 to 5 years, they would oversee the 2 largest projects that this town will ever do. We will also see, we think, we believe, a savings in the amount of engineering services that we have to contract out with Brown, McGill, or some of those others that we're contracting with by bringing that service in-house.
If that's
Again,
the case, then we would have already, it would already be a engineering budget line item in the 2 loans that we're looking at.
that's correct, the 12.5
Why wouldn't
million.
we pay this, if we decided to do this, pay this out of that, and it would be no added expense at all? If you've already got $8 million set aside for those projects, and within that, there's engineering, we're pulling that out, and we're spending the same money, or hopefully less, in a different direction. Why would that be an increase?
Well, no, the idea is that we spent close to $1 million in just the sewer engineering project that we've done already. We believe that some of that, it's not a total wash, but some of that could be saved by doing that in-house instead of hiring one of the larger firms.
I think maybe where the Johns are getting at, that if we have that position and the duration of the projects is 4 years, maybe 5 years, at the end of that period of time when those projects are hopefully completed, it's unlikely, I think, that we would have a continuing need for a person at that level
That's
without those kind of projects. If that's the case, and just as the way in which we're financing those projects, those are long-term projects that would last conceivably 30, 40, 50 years. We'll finance them through debt service on a lengthy period. If we were to take a portion of that debt service and apply it to our positions over the next 4 to 5 years, then it'd have the same effect of spreading the expense during the next 4 to 5 years for our guy over the life of those projects, and therefore the impact on our operating budget or tax increase or whatever would be greatly reduced. You follow
I
where
do.
I'm going with that? And so I think
Right.
there's a good argument to look at it that way, and I think where Commissioner Weber's coming from, if we could somehow get a feel for what the potential allocation of that might be between the various projects, we can include a line item in each of those projects to cover our in-house guidelines.
Well,
Yes, yeah.
Honestly, I'm looking at these numbers and I'm thinking, why in the hell would we want to pay that money when we've got a civil engineer for only $300 a month? And he can give us that expertise.
He's unqualified.
I'm not joking.
What I'm saying, Ron, is it looks like we're counting it twice. We've already got engineering expense coming to us in the loan proceeds. And if we put an engineer on town payroll, then we're paying twice. We're counting it twice. We'd only be paying one, but we're counting it.
Right, I understand what you're saying. In the budget, that could be true, because what you're going to end up doing is backing out of your loan proceeds, reducing that amount that you borrow overall, because we can save additional money in engineering costs. So instead of $1 million, you may spend only $200,000 with an engineering firm that has to have that second set of eyes and to present it to the state or whatever it might be. So I don't know those numbers right off the top of my head. We'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, because we've not had real discussion on this position
right.
or potential here, but
Right.
is this an attempt to go in the direction of getting away from using Brown Engineering and
It could
as
be
a town firm? I mean, or what?
It is
What's
completely
our
up
goal
to
here?
Yeah, it's completely up to council. My intention in putting this down was the short term, that 3 to 5 year period when we know that our engineering costs are going to skyrocket with these projects that are coming up, large projects, the largest we've ever seen. And I'm not sure that we have the capacity on staff to handle those types of projects. And so this person would be responsible for making sure that these are completed.
Now the month before last, we rejected the bid from Brown Engineering on the sewer line replacement, and we still haven't gotten anything back.
We're meeting tomorrow with him.
Okay, and maybe that's the one we want to use as an example.
That'd
to
be a
see
good
where
idea.
This might help
That's right.
in relation to that one.
We can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, the second position is the Parks and Recreation Director position that we have discussed several times. The idea was that the Parks and Rec Director would oversee lake operations and, of course, the maintenance. As you know, we've expanded our parks tremendously. We have one of the largest parks now in the state, municipally owned. We see the event programming of the town increasing and the potential of that for revenue, as a revenue source increasing. And the idea is to find that right person that can support and promote our events as well as supervise that department.
So, I hate to interrupt you again. I know all of you could not be at the Weed Patch Mountain grand opening, but during that, Conserving Carolina announced that they have now purchased how many acres was it? I forgot.
About 200 and some odd.
acres north of Weed Patch Mountain, which is where all the lots were for being developed by Gray Rock. And I look at I believe their intent down the road is to try to offer that as connection to us. I haven't heard that, but I'm thinking that may happen. So,
Well, I just feel we've reached that point with this amount of property and this amount of maintenance, and I mean, this is a full-time job, but also if we get that person who could help us bring events to the community, it'd bring in way additional revenue more than this salary that we're paying. And not only healthy for the community, but also for our own town management. So I strongly support this. I just see more benefits and revenue and management, and they've got their hands full in Parks and Rec, but also, you know, you would put your lake under it, all your parks under it. It's a big position.
yeah, and this only talks about athletic and recreation programs, but of course, the park and playground system, but all the trails and trail management and stuff involved, which this also, again, under the reorganization includes the lake, which is our largest recreational asset, to bring all that under one department.
That's correct.
I believe is the right direction.
What staff members now would be under the budget currently of Parks and Rec?
Parks and Rec just have 2 right now. Clint, of course, moved to Community Development. Dean would move under the Parks and Rec Director position if it's funded.
No,
And
no. He stays in the lake operations aspect of the Parks and Recreation Department. But you've got Melody and Andy who actually are in
That's
the
what I
Parks
said.
and Recreation line of the department,
yeah,
which are just the 2 for maintenance and landscaping and stuff, and then you got the 1 part-time position.
So I was just thinking as
Yeah,
the
so-
overall effect of this position, will there be some restructuring that in the budget now that you're presenting, is that restructured? Or is it still where it was?
it's halfway restructured. What I've done is expanded the community development position, but because of the amount of tax increase that we were proposing, I've decided to leave lake operations separate for right now, but it's an easy move. So, for example, everything that you see in lake operations will move under Parks and Rec if that happens.
Ron, is it your intention that the Parks and Recreation Director will bring more money into the town than what their added position will cost?
I hear that, but I don't think it's going to be immediate. I do think it will, but I think also you're going to see events that will not have a direct effect on our budget, but community-wide will have an effect. And a good example of that is a Dirty Dancing Festival. While you can raise some money for your organization through that way, a lot of it is just by bringing people in and using the restaurants and shopping and et cetera, et cetera. So to me, it may not be that direct benefit, and it may be a while to get those events up and running.
I think-
The Chamber does the Dirty Dancing Festival,
That's right.
and, you know, if we're looking at
Please, I can't hear you with that AC running.
turn that, Sam, can you turn that AC off? I'll try speaking here too. Okay. All right, if we're gonna look at bringing somebody on staff because we think it's gonna bring more money into the town, then wouldn't it be reasonable to have some projections done and where it's gonna come from, what the event would be? You know, it's easy to say, well, this type position should do this and that, but if we're looking at a 40% tax increase, I gotta tell you, that's not gonna fly. We gotta come up with some way, we gotta find some ways, some things to cut, and I would put Parks and Recreation Director under the like to have category rather than the must have. So,
Well, again-
in my mind, just from where I'm coming from, for me to say, okay, we need a Parks and Recreation Director, and the justification for that is they're gonna bring in more money than we're going to, than it's gonna cost us, then I wanna see the specifics. Show me where it's gonna come from.
But that's
Follow
just,
me?
yeah, that's not just the only thing that position brings in. It's also constantly managing the lake and all our parks and scheduling all this mowing and maintenance that we've got to do. It's not just that money, but long-term, they would be scheduling, like hopefully to get a old band in here and do some special events with some music and things. But initially, just managing what we got takes that position. But yes, over time, the whole community will benefit from these other events. And so-
Do you think it's reasonable to have it, you know, laid out in the job description and what they would be and and if they're taking over, if they're doing some things now that somebody else has been doing, then what is there, you know, how's that time being spent? I'm not saying that it's not valuable. I'm just saying that if we're looking at a tax increase, particularly one the size that we've seen this morning, then we have to look very closely at every increase we're looking at. And we have to keep in mind too that, you know, what may be valuable to folks on this side of the lake may have little or no value to the folks on the northern side of the lake because, and they're helping pay for it too.
Well, it's, you know, our community's one, period. We're all together. Sometimes this side benefits more than that, and sometimes that, but we're one community, we're one group of people, we're one family is what I always call us.
Yeah.
And we've expanded Parks and Rec and expanded and kept everything down to the minimum. And that's one reason we're looking at such a big increase, which, like I said, I'm sure we're going to cut some, but because we've scraped so long, the old wheels caught up with us now. So
Well,
we have run this thing on vapors for, I know this 7 years, 6.5 years I've been here.
That brings me another question I thought of as we were going through. You said we haven't had a tax increase since 2012. I remember that one. But we should have had increased revenues by virtue of the fact that property values have increased and new houses have been built and that sort of thing. Sam, do you have the breakdown on that?
Yeah, it's been really flat.
It has?
Yeah, the values in Lake Lord have been flat for the last 5 years.
Yeah, even with the new houses and so forth?
That's what the county reports show.
Okay.
And we know the county is not raising ad valorem this year,
That's correct.
not increasing.
Well, that's what's been proposed.
Their tax rate is the same.
Okay, and we have increased some revenues off the lake too by increasing our permit fees and that kind of thing. So we can't say there has not been any tax increase because we've increased our fees, and that's all kind of part of the, it goes in the same bucket.
Yeah, and that increase, that revenue increase from those permit fee increases will barely pay for dredging.
Right, I understand. I'm just saying, let's
I got it.
let's take a realistic look.
But the Parks and Recreation Director would handle everything related to Parks and Recreation and trails, including event coordination, which right now is done in a great part by the Parks and Recreation Board. But the event coordinator, and there's been a lot of requests for different things that have been tabled, ignored, whatever, because they ain't got to.
No.
This same person would be the one handling those concession agreements and overseeing overseeing even the maintenance people that do the maintenance for these parks and recreation. And of course with Dean, and I wasn't thinking of Dean going into that position. This is a different person
That's right.
altogether, and the functions are different from a lake manager.
That's correct.
Now, whether or not we need somebody at the salary level of Dean that might be phased out over time through attrition, I don't know. But and that's why one reason I voted to have Clint moved over here under all the permitting and stuff, because I don't see that requires those two people. But it's a lake operation department, and it's not a department head position, but it's a sub-department of the Parks and Recreation. We're also, and remember, we've also talked about, and we put it off the year before last, of repaving the tennis court and all that, and moving the tennis court and all the active sports, tennis, pickleball, basketball, all out towards the school and the golf course area. Moving all the active sports out there, we have all the passive recreation here and events and things of that nature. And as we become more revenue producing on these passive activities, then that will help pay for that eventually too. But this is something with all the park assets we now have, and plus what we just purchased, that needs that management. And right now, we don't have that management aspect of it.
All I'm saying is, I'm not convinced. I understand where Steve's coming from, I understand where Bob's coming from, and what both of them are saying has merit. But until I see it in more detail, and see it, what the job description is, what they're gonna be doing, how that's gonna bring more money into the, how that's gonna offset the expense, and where the jobs that this person is taking over, whoever's handling that before, what's become of that.
There's really no one handling those functions now.
Well, somebody's supposed to be handling, you're supposed to be doing the concession agreements.
Well,
and-
yeah, but
Yeah,
if,
But, I'm just saying that there are you know, if you're talking about, you know, what, everything that I heard mentioned here, somebody's doing now. And I just want to see what, you know, we're leaving somebody of some responsibility here. Okay, not saying there's not something else they need to be doing, but just, you know, what is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I just want, I need more details. I
Right.
don't have enough information now to vote for it.
Well, and we're not asking you to vote. Again, these, just understand when I first started out, these are things that either individuals on the board or
Okay,
a collection of individuals on the board have asked for. And so that's why they're in the budget.
okay.
I did not feel comfortable enough myself removing it and
That
reducing
came
it.
from me initially.
Yeah.
So,
All right, the third position that's being proposed is the utility maintenance tech. And again, this was requested by the board to look at a full-time position to help in public works. The final position that's being proposed is a part-time clerk position in planning and community development, primarily to take minutes, I understand, and handle some of the permitting requirements, the basic paperwork. You take all of those to the total for those 4 new positions, and you're looking at $236,000, so almost 3 cents on a tax rate. But again, that's why it's important for you to realize that these are the big items that are found within the budget that have effect on that tax rate.
Say that again, 236,000?
236,000, yes, sir.
Okay, I got it.
Yep.
why are we going, well, I remember us talking before about a potential board clerk for all the boards, and now we've evolved to a part-time permitting technician. So is this person going to be issuing all the permits that the town issues, or what?
No, I think it's more of a part-time clerk position to handle the
Where?
minute recording,
What's your plan as to which department this would be under?
community development. All right. The second thing to talk about,
Yeah, good, no.
oh, okay, sorry, is the Marina and Boardwalk project. As you know, we are excited about the TDA plan and the possibilities that it brings. However, there's a big price tag that comes with that. It is what we expect to be a $3.7 million project total that includes the marina building, the marina itself, the redesign, and the boardwalk redesign. The first part or phase of that program is to do planning, design, and engineering. That's estimated at about $300,000. We think it may be even a little bit more than that. You'll see in your capital projects list a $300,000 payment in cash. That, of course, takes a huge amount of money in your budget. So over 3 cents for the Marina Boardwalk project. What we didn't feel comfortable in doing is attaching any revenue sources to this because it became so hard to do. We do not know how much private money might be invested. We do not know if we can get a grant for that project. But what we do know is that planning, design, and engineering has to be done prior to us working on those other components of the plan. We did attach $50,000 in revenue from the TDA, which will be available to us this year, we hope. That funding decision will be made over the next few weeks within the month. But we do believe that some of that TDA development money will come back to the town. Of course, it doesn't even come close to the $300,000 that we need to move this project forward.
And that 50 is a part of the 3.
That's correct. There's
No, no, in
$50,000 in your
addition to-
revenue. That's correct.
Oh, okay. So, because TVA mentioned early on that they may be able to contribute towards the engineering aspect as well as the construction aspect. But these, of course, the marina and the marina building are the 2 primary revenue producing activities. And we need to do this in order to make that happen. So you got to spend money to make money. Now the boardwalk, is there anything in here for like just simply painting it prior to the equestrian games? Are we gonna leave those ugly boards just like they are prior to the question, Greg?
We can certainly do it. We could find some money in the current year budget to do that if you feel it's important.
My proposal would bring in some more geese and ducks, and people be busy trying to dodge them, they won't see the boards. It'd be a whole lot better route to take.
The Parks and Rec has worked too hard to get rid of them geese and ducks.
Well, we could put trained ducks and geese, and we could get rid of them.
You want union geese or?
That's all I'm sorry.
I will say the boardwalk, as you know, is in very
Right.
bad shape, and we need to start making plans to replace
Well,
that.
that's what this was, and that's what was driving this primarily, is to make this happen because of the continued deterioration of what's there, which has been a known problem now for 2 to 3 years. I remember this is the second or third year we've discussed it and how bad it is. The marina expansion we discussed last year and went ahead and voted to do that, and then we ran into problems with fire suppression requirements. Now, and of course, that was going to be debt there and proceeds coming from that. But now, does that carry over, or is that just refunded again, or what? How was that money we allocated last year for the marina expansion?
It'll go into your general fund and then be reallocated at the
Okay.
end of the year.
Okay.
Unless we set up a project ordinance. Did we set up a project ordinance for the marina project? Okay, then it'll be a little bit different. But you can always reallocate that money. But right now, it's set aside for that project.
How much is that?
Do you recall how much we set aside?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The marina expansion project that we budgeted this year?
The one in the budget right now?
The one in the budget right now, yes, sir.
Yeah, it's, I believe it was through a loan, we haven't done anything, so either
What was the amount, Sam?
The amount?
move it forward, we haven't done anything.
No, the amount that was budgeted for the loan. I don't recall right off.
How much was it?
Uh-huh.
Well, Ron, while he's looking, I'd like to weigh in on this Marina Boardwalk project. It's a project I love. I love it because I hope, without having done a pro forma, this is another one of these projects that will net income to the town over time. And yet, I think at this point, before spending $300,000 to engage in the engineering, I personally think there's enough conceptual definition on that project that a pro forma could be created, and not with a lot of effort. I think our asset management committee, for example, has resources on there, I think, that could pretty quickly gen up a pro forma that looks at the potential revenue or expected revenue from that project. And I say that because we've defined in that project the number of new additional slip income. That would be a major component, right, of the income stream. We know what those are right now, subject to some increase in rates. We know approximately, or we should, the amount of square footage in the building and the allocation of that square footage between the TDA, a new restaurant operator, and other uses. And so I don't think it would be a stretch to come up with an average lease rate for the restaurant space. We don't know exactly what it is, but we can come up with that and project our income from that. And I don't think it would be a very difficult task to estimate what the potential operating and maintenance expense of that project would be. And so, before we go off, I know we're only spending the front end dollars on this, but before we do that, I would like to see a pro forma. And I would just add finally, that I think we have a good example now, a life example of why we absolutely need to do that, as we're struggling with our strip center project. And I think it's important for us to do that. We can always update it, as we march on, but I'd like to see, before we finally have to vote on this thing, a pro forma.
And as a separate item in that, we already can determine what revenue we'll net from the marina spaces that are added.
Correct.
I mean, and with the waiting list we have and how much we already charge, that's easy to put in there.
So, I
Now, we're
think
not
that's
gonna
something we
gain
can
any
do.
money from the boardwalk necessarily, but safety and
From the LAB position, you know, you keep in mind, we're adding boats, we're adding boats when we're adding slips. Got to keep that in mind, because.
but we aren't really. We're just making the slips available on the lake instead of hauling them back and forth. But we aren't really adding boats necessarily, especially when you're talking residents.
That wasn't entirely accurate. Remember, we got those, the first information we got on that was that there was a waiting list was there that would cover all of the slips, you know,
Right.
but the, everybody who was trailering boats in was not on the waiting list for a,
Right, it's not an exact number, but
Right.
it's pretty doggone close. I mean, you
I
know,
think, if I remember right, it was about 2/3. Does that sound right? Yeah.
67%, that's fine with me.
But I agree with Kevin. People, performers are done all the time without engineering. We can do that.
Okay. The third item there is the dredging project, is budgeted at $400,000. Again, we've heard several times that the storm that we had has completely filled in what little work was done by our previous contractor. The idea is to spend a little bit more money in order to try to catch up. We certainly could easily spend the $300,000, which we need to in order to take advantage of the grant. But that would be an additional $100,000, or I'm sorry, $75,000, I think, of new money that was budgeted over this fiscal year. So keep that in mind as you're reviewing programs. And of course, the one of the large projects is the dam repair project. You'll see loan proceeds for about $5 million. Sam is here, so Sam, help me if I misstate this. We have had conversations with the local government commission. As you know, they were not fond of the idea of revenue bonds. They have not been fond of the incremental financing. And so what we have been left with is going to banks and discussing how to move forward with borrowing that $5 million. It's hard to say that we can have anything that we'll put up as collateral, I guess you would say, for this type of project. And so what you have in your budget recommendation is, again, $5 million in loan proceeds that will wash out, and it carries over the $368,000 a year in debt service payments.
Have we, I think I had pointed out to you and to Sam that the dam up at Lake Adger was undergoing similar repair program, and that Polk County, was reported that Polk County was pursuing USDA funds for that? Have we looked into that yet?
The USDA announcement was just sent out, so we're going to look at that.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Real quick, I had one last question. I forgot. You don't need to go back on the Marina Boardwalk.
Mhm.
Is there a potential for part-of money on that for redevelopment or redesign?
There's two grants. Partif is one, and the second would be the same grant, actually, that we're using for the dredging. The state has, in that same Department of Recreation grant, that we think we can use as well. And that's why I'm saying it's hard to know that we can tie these things together. We can always put some numbers down on paper, but again, until you're awarded that grant, you really don't know. But we know we could potentially have some grant funds go towards that project, and possibly some private, and some foundation money or something.
And you mentioned I said one, but you mentioned earlier the 300,000 represented a 3-cent tax increase. So is our tax revenue 100,000 per penny now?
No, I said just slightly over. It's about 255 is what I want to say for 3 cents. So it's almost 85,000 a penny.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're still around. Okay.
84 and a
Good.
change.
Okay.
Yep.
Good.
Give me that number again.
Uh,
Per penny is how much?
Per penny is
85 around.
84, 85,000. Yeah.
Okay.
One more question, Ron.
84? Okay.
83,490.
Oh, gee, that's,
83.
yeah, that's not even 83 and a half.
What is the town's past history on private funds being monies to come for projects? Is there any?
I will say, I can't speak of projects. I know we have occasionally received donations, private donations for things going on. Probably the biggest that I remember, just in my short tenure, was the fire. Of course, we brought in roughly about $30,000 worth of private funds, somewhere in there, to help for equipment and other needs. But I don't know if we've ever done a full-scale project with private money.
Nothing significant.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. That sort of leaves us with personnel costs and benefits. As you know, we are looking at another 10% increase in our health insurance. That comes on top of a large increase from last year, and so we've absorbed that into the budget again this year. We also have a cost of living adjustment. We know that it's about 2.2 in the state. We have recommended 2.5, and just so you know, that 0.5% equals about $10,000. So, you know, for every 0.5% you go down, you're saving $10,000.
Oh, you're recommending 2.5 this year?
Yes, sir.
It'd be $50,000.
And within the budget, there's no recommendation for, or I'm sorry, there is recommendation for longevity, but no recommendation for performance increases.
So the 2.5% COLA would be $2,500, or $25,000 in the budget,
50.
right?
50,
50.
yeah.
It's, no, 25,000, right?
That'd be 5
About
times
five.
10.
Huh?
5 times 10.
0.5% per 10,000, that's 5 times 0.5%, 2.5%,
2.5%.
50,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, 0.5%.
That's what you
That's
got.
terrible. Yeah.
But
So that's 20,000, 20, 40, 50, 45, yeah.
It's 2.5%.
No, sorry. I'll get it right. 50.
2.5 is $50,000.
Takes me a while to get there.
okay.
Come on, Sam, help us out.
Wow,
Wow, there you go. That's the person putting your budget together.
wow.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's 50,000.
Yes, you're right.
The-
1% equals
the health
$20,000.
insurance,
That's
is
correct.
That's right.
The health insurance, is that a state program?
We are in the state health program, yes, sir.
Okay, do we have any other options that might be cheaper on health insurance, but still provide the same coverage, basically?
I would have to look into that. I do not know.
I think you're under contractual obligation.
Okay. So across the state, different municipalities and state system itself, I guess, is covered 100% by the employer everywhere.
Under the state system,
Okay.
Oh,
You really do get some cost savings benefits to that by, you know, what you find is when you go into that private, folks with really good histories do well, but then you'll see the other folks, they drop out, and so it ends up costing you more money to be in that pool. But you're left with people with just bad histories. Okay. The only other, if you will, turn to page. Page 146. I point this out because these are your capital projects that are proposed for this year. There are 12 capital projects. As you can see, the $300,000 for the marina and the boardwalk is the largest project. And I did want you to know, if you look at your CIP and you go down through that list, there are a couple of things missing. For example, the walkway connector to Chimney Rock, because we have not tied down a grant there, that was pulled. As you get down towards the bottom, we did add the small area recreational plan that jumped ahead of, I believe, 2 more projects because of the cost. I think the bucket truck, and it seems like there was one more. But because of the price of those, we had roughly about $10,000 left in that area, and so that's what we moved forward. Those projects, again, can be taken off the list as you feel necessary. So that might be one other area that you want to take a look at as you're reviewing your budgets.
Do you have the info sheet in here from the CIP on those projects?
Not the info sheets, you have the summary, which is starts on page,
I'm looking for the one that details what the small area recreational study is. What's the area of focus?
that's the one that you discussed over there at the school. It was for the small area recreational plan for the school area off of number 9. The golf course.
Oh, for tennis court and pickleball court?
Yes, sir.
And we need to pay $10,000 on where to decide to put those things.
Through that planning study.
Yeah, I think that's a waste of money, to be honest about it. I think we could easily decide that.
Well, you do need some land design help with that, some CAD.
What, we can't put the tennis court on the hill?
You could.
Come on,
It wouldn't be popular.
darn.
New concept.
As you look through that, you'll also notice that you have your electric capital, which is quite high just because of the dam project. And then you also have your water and sewer project. I will say that the water and sewer fund is...
Where are you now? Where are you?
I just jumped around to your other categories. I'm not on a specific page.
Okay.
The other project, again, the water and sewer project, your sewer replacement project is a large project, but it can be absorbed in the rate increase, it looks like, that y'all passed a few years ago in preparation for the Green Line. So no additional rate increase is being proposed in your budget.
Yeah, that was the idea for making that rate increase to begin with.
That's right.
So we we have been accumulating some money in that account?
There is going to be some accumulation. I'm not sure how much.
We spent about $1 million in engineering for that account. So
Right. And we spent it out of that account?
That's right.
So we haven't used any of our loan proceeds?
Yeah, we haven't gotten a loan.
Right. So the money we spent, that $1 million was not borrowed money, that came out of the,
We're running that.
Okay.
So far.
good, okay.
So, I hate to keep asking this question again. I can't really ever remember. Tell me again why our 2 largest capital projects, my understanding, the dam and the sewer, do not show up on the capital projects list.
They show up on your summaries now. They do.
They show up on your summary then. I'm looking at the list on page 146.
Oh,
And I'm asking why.
yeah, they won't be on this list. They are in your budget. They are being funded. So they are in your debt service and your loan proceeds.
Is that because they're from separate accounts? Because we had our generalized CIP, then we had our water and sewer, and then we had our hydroelectric, and they were separate lists in the plan.
That's right.
Is that why they're
Yeah.
not on this list in this
If you
document?
look in
Well, I
your-
know it's someplace else.
Yeah,
My
there-
question isn't why isn't it someplace else?
If you look
My
on
question
page
is
45.
why isn't it on here? And your answer is because it's been funded somewhere else?
Look at page 172,
Okay.
Kevin. That's your CIP for the water and sewer department.
So this list that I'm looking at is
your general fund.
just a general fund CIP?
There
Okay.
you go, yeah. Yeah.
Sam,
I just want to add something on the general fund, CIP. that there's two projects, the marina expansion at 160 that you were asking how much, and the bathrooms. And evidently, we're not going to get to those,
Yeah?
so we need to move those forward
Oh,
to next year. So we need to add those
on this list?
on that list.
Okay.
Well,
But it won't affect the budget because on the revenue side, we show the loan proceeds, and then on the expenditure side, we show the expense.
Right.
Following years, we'll start showing debt service.
Okay.
But immediately for next year, it won't really affect the bottom line.
Okay.
and we'll bring a budget amendment for those two, yeah.
And 186 is your hydroelectric CIP, which shows the dam and all that.
And so in this, I'm back on, I get that, and thanks. And I'm back
Yeah.
on 140, there are two columns here on this, and the numbers in both columns are the same. And the columns don't have headings.
Oh, sorry.
Is the left column like the
Yeah.
total project cost, and the right column the amount that is being budgeted for this year? Or is it, what is the two column? What does that
Yeah,
mean?
sorry about that. The first column is what you're being proposed for year one, and your second column is the total project cost.
The second column to the right is a total project cost.
Mhm.
All right, then, I guess I'd ask, even though we're only budgeting in the first year, the anticipated engineering expense for the marina and boardwalk, we know the ultimate cost of that project is going to be
3.7.
enormously more, 3.7.
Right.
Why then do we not show 3.7 in the second column?
Because instead of debt financing, I chose to do cash for the 300,000. So I'm counting that as just one specific project, even though it's part of a larger project.
Okay.
And the 3.7's over those future years and not just this year.
Yeah,
So
but-
300's our total for this year.
Well, the left column is a
Right.
total for this year. The
Which
right
is-
column is
right.
supposed to be the total for the project.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I guess
I can
I'm
always-
asking, why doesn't that?
I could always go back and add that. Yeah.
You know, I mean, it just, to me, it kind of shows, if I were, it almost shows a misleading picture of that project. In a sense, if I look at that and you say, wow, it's $300,000 in the right for the whole project, well, the whole nuance of the way you decided to pay for it this year, it's kind of lost on me, you know?
Well,
If we're
also
approving
think that, a board may decide to go ahead and do the engineering, but may not move forward with the project, and so that could sit on the shelf. I guess that's sort of the way I was looking at it.
Well, wouldn't that the same logic apply to any other of these projects where there were future year funding in the overall capital expense?
Except for your two largest, which I think you're going to have to move forward with anyway, which is why they're on there. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I got one quick question for Sam. Sam, let me make sure I say this correctly. All right, this time last year when we're doing our budgets, we set aside the money, or we're using the rate increase on sewer to cover, because we had to, because we knew that would cover the debt service. All right, so we're coming into this year, and that's already been done. So from last fiscal year to this fiscal year, as far as the sewer is concerned, even though we're taking a different direction with it, we should be spending about the same amount of money. So really what we had last year should transfer to this year without it being that's not the right word. What we used for budget numbers last year, we should be using for budget numbers essentially this year without it being an increase. Is that, are you following me?
You're talking about the revenues, the collection of.
Yeah, I'm talking
Water and sewer?
Right, I'm talking about money in, money out.
Yes.
Okay, so really, we've got, even though,
Same.
yeah, it's easy to not get your head around the whole thing, that, well, now we got to put all this system in, we got to replace our sewer system, we didn't have to do that before, that's going to cost a bunch of extra money. When in reality, it's not. We are going to do it, taking a different direction. but we're spending the same money that we had allocated and that we had already made provisions to pay, right?
Right, we're supposed to just keep.
It's just
squirreling
kind of a-
that money away.
Yeah, a wash from one year to the next. Yeah,
Well,
okay.
but I didn't recall the water sewer increase to pay the debt service. I thought that we did that simply to meet the requirements of being able to get the loan
That's-
eligibility.
That's right.
But
We had to.
did that amount of increase, does that help pay or fully pay our debt on that loan?
That's the way I remembered it. Sam, tell me if I'm wrong, but we had to increase the rates enough so that when we got the loan, we were already collecting an amount sufficient to make the debt service.
That's right, they're both right, yes.
Okay, we're both right. Okay.
That's good.
Well, we had to raise it to be eligible to get the loan. And the state mandated that how high we had to go, basically.
Right.
And that, in turn, makes the debt, okay, I got it, yeah.
Okay, well, but my
Yeah.
point is, we aren't looking at having to do some extra funding this year to cover what we know has to be done on sewer.
That's correct.
Okay.
We're counting on that grant alone.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why you see the loan proceeds. It looks, when somebody says a $25 million budget and you look at it and you say, why in the world would Lake Lure have a $25 million budget? That's not the case. Most of that's loan proceeds. It's going to wash in, wash out,
Yeah.
and then we'll have debt service.
Right.
So what you're saying, for the dummy here, is there should be no other increase with what was done to cover that. That's going to cover that every year, correct? Till it's repaid.
At $12.5 million. If,
The $12.5 million.
if you see, that's right, that's the number.
Right, if that's the number it ends up being.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that water and sewer has to stand on its own. We can't supplement it from the general fund.
Right.
Yeah, and the electric, we're having to do that. That's where you're going to see, we're having to pump taxpayer money into the electric fund to help pay for operations, so the operations money can be used towards the debt service for the project.
Okay.
You got a loan? Is that a loan to the fund?
No,
Or
it's-
Did that have to be repaid?
It doesn't, we didn't set it up or design it to be. Some towns do that, but, I mean, that's certainly up to y'all if you want to repay it at some point, but we're looking at 20 years out.
So the debt service on the dam, we'll use electric income first.
That's correct.
And even after we use 100% of electric Duke Power income, there's still a shortfall.
That's correct.
Okay, so we got to cover that shortfall and cover or take into account that we aren't getting some money from there that we had been using earlier for dredging and that sort of thing.
Well, you still have your operations and you still have your debt service.
Right?
Okay, so the operational money was being paid for out of the proceeds
Yeah.
of your electric fund. That money will be moved over. It's not enough to cover it.
Right.
So now you're going to infuse that with more cash tax money that will come in and cover operations.
Okay, yeah, that was, I should have clarified myself. I was talking about the net, I wasn't talking about the gross.
I'm sorry.
I was talking about the net income, not the gross, so,
Okay.
yeah, that was,
Yeah,
obviously you take your expenses specific to the dam out of that first.
that's right.
Yeah.
All right, so with that, and again, this was not the budget that I was hoping to present to you, but we sort of are where we are, and these are the big decisions that need to be made by the board. So we will look to you for further guidance as we start preparing whatever you need to make those decisions. And, be happy to set up as many meetings as you'd like. And one other thing that I meant to mention, back when we were discussing, was the fire departments, volunteer fire departments. We had a $139,000 request from one fire department, a $55,000 request, and then a $45,000 request. I've just bumped those back to the current year funding level, so,
Well, then that means the 139 came from Fairfield, and what did we end up giving them last year, 89?
85 or 84 or
85,
something like that.
89.
Yeah.
That's a $50,000 difference there. So I guess one of my questions will be when we sit down with them is out of that 50,000, what was it for and what is in there that they absolutely could not live without, you know.
Well, and that's a discussion for another time, but their capital requests were quite high. You know, and there's some discussion that needs to be centered around purchasing assets that aren't owned by the town. Because really, you know, you look at their budget request, and that's what this is turning into, is that we are purchasing those assets, whether it be vehicles or building improvements for a volunteer fire department. So, again, they would like to meet with y'all, which we, of course, had promised them they could. So we will set up that meeting whenever y'all feel it's appropriate.
Yeah, I'd like to have them first and then the department heads, and whether it's all on the same day or not, it's fine, but I'd rather go through all the fire departments first.
When do we have to have this finalized?
The end of June 26th, I believe it is.
Wasn't there a request for all the volunteer fire departments and the Lake Lure Fire Department to have a joint meeting?
We did. We've actually met twice.
That's already occurred?
That's already occurred. They specifically wanted to meet with town council regarding the budget.
All right, as a group or just as each one of them by themselves, or just one or two of them by themselves?
They didn't say, but we can certainly invite them in and they could
Okay.
discuss their
When you say they didn't
budget.
say, you're talking about?
The chiefs,
Okay, the Fairfield chief?
both Fairfield, Bills Creek, and Chimney Rock.
Okay, all three of them, okay. All right, well, it would be good, you know, the thing I have to always keep reminding myself of is these are all volunteers.
That's right.
And they put in a ton of work. I know in
Right.
several of them's case, it's their life. They treat it with they go into that job with every bit as much enthusiasm as somebody who's making $100,000 a year.
Right.
And so I think we ought to accommodate them every chance we get. So if they want to meet with us, then
Sure.
then I'm all for it.
I asked last week, in 2012 or 13, when they separated and first came up with the separating the fire tax. Might have been 14, 12, 13, 14. And then we got away from doing that presentation every year on showing the values of property protected by the respective departments, which help to determine that prorated percent. I'd like to see that reflection of those current numbers this year when we sit down and talk with them, and to see exactly how much that proration should be for the fire department.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's one department where the type of analysis I was talking about earlier is very easy to do. You know, you got the property values, you know the percentage that insurance drops by having whatever rating, and we know what it costs to have a fire department, so it's, I agree with Stephen, that's an important thing to have.
I'm gonna write that one down.
That's twice in a day.
Yeah, you might want to get it notarized too. I might say I didn't really say it.
Write that down and get it notarized. Now, there was a discussion, I had a discussion with David on the full-time position you're asking for, and the fact that they have had a significant problem filling part-time for that work. Because they know it's only a short time period, and they'd end up being out of a job around November and nothing in the future for it. And that's one reason they wanted to come forward and ask for full-time, and they haven't even filled that part-time. The part-time is Alex, which is under Parks and Rec. And
Which we're paying through Public Works now, I understand.
Huh?
We are paying Alex through Public Works.
What about the part-time that was in
He's
Parks and Rec?
bouncing back and forth.
Same,
Yeah.
okay.
It's still there, it's budgeted, but they haven't hired.
So you got two pots of money for paying for one person back and forth floating, I guess.
One person is being paid out of Public Works. The Park and Rec position isn't filled.
But he's been working Parks and Rec.
That's right.
Okay. Far be it beyond me how you manage your allowance. But That's one reason David wanted to come in and ask for the full-time, and I'm aware of that. But Parks and Rec had also been talking about a potential full-time, and I can see we can't do it. Contract, what about John down at the dam? We talked last year about how important it was to get out of these contract labor because of the amount of hours and the money spent, and that we were going to have to make that a position as opposed to a contract. We're not talking any more money except for, well, we're really not talking any more money.
He's requesting more money this year. Unfortunately, it wasn't there, and I've backed it back down, but that's something we're going to have to deal with this year, I'm certain.
But it's not in here.
That's correct.
So let's not forget it for an item of discussion somewhere in this process before we get done, if we need to do it this year.
Can I get a clarification on John? So it's Donnie and John that are there,
That's correct.
and John is a contractor,
That's correct.
40 hours or
However hours they need, how many hours they need him there.
so.
It's not a full
works-
40.
We're billed on how many hours he works.
That's correct.
And does he work for himself?
Yes.
And he's the guy we're relying on putting the thing back together.
Yes.
And his expertise, his experience, what is that? I mean, is he the only guy in the southeast that does those kind of things?
I don't know the answer to that. He's been working here for how long? A while.
About 10 years
10 years. So
as a contractor.
as a contract.
Does he work under David's direction?
he is now Donnie's and David's.
Say it again.
Donnie's and David's.
Donnie and David, okay.
He's actually more knowledgeable about this process than Donnie is.
On certain aspects, that's correct. Yeah.
Just a couple comments. You know, I'm brand new at being on this side of the counter here.
Good, we blame you for everything.
Exactly. And so, you know, it's a whole different perspective, trying to figure out how we're going to pay for all this. You know, to begin with, you know, the notion of raising taxes, even if we've not done it, you know, over a lengthy period of time, and somehow we've been able to keep the doors open and the lights on, and, you know, but neglecting, you know, things that needed attention and maintenance. I still believe that we should be able to say at the end of the day, before we make an adjustment in tax rate upward, that we are doing everything we can, you know, to wring out any unnecessary cost. And I'm not talking about delaying maintenance but unnecessary cost, or being more efficient, and also being more creative in terms of the way we approach things, you know, to be more efficient. And so that would be one question. Are you satisfied at this point that the town is at that point? Or are there additional things you think the council or you need to look into from an expense side? And I don't expect an answer right now,
Right.
but just be thinking about that.
Certainly.
And then secondly, on the creative side, you know, we going to our tax base, going to our existing taxpayers and asking for an increase. They are the citizen property owners, and they are the benefactors of what the town provides. But I would like to think that we're also looking beyond that to other revenue sources. You know, we talked about things like maximizing the income revenue, net income from our dam, and operating the power station a little more effectively, which probably means getting that small generator online as soon as we can, and taking a good hard look at when we generate power, for how long, and when we don't, why not. That would be another area that I'd like to see us focus on. Then beyond that, we've talked about other potential revenue sources, one of which just came up recently. I have really limited, no knowledge of the sales tax opportunity. Is there a local sales tax option for us to... No, we could not do that. Okay.
I believe that's legislative. then.
I disagree.
Well, you have to go to the state
Right.
and petition the state.
Petition the state.
Do a
Yeah.
referendum
To do that? Okay.
And then it's set at the county.
Well, here's the reason that I even bring that up. You know, we are a little bit different, say, than a Rutherfordton, in that we're a resort community. And a lot of these amenities that we've been talking about, this whole park system here, other things, our lake, you know, we provide that not only for the enjoyment of our residents, but of our visitors. And to the extent that we have some things like the beach concession, you know, that generate revenue from the visitors, I think we should be looking at other ways to produce revenue, whether it's parking fees. I don't want to turn this into, I don't want to drive people away from here, but if there are other ways creatively that we can generate revenue off the people that visit here and enjoy our assets, I would like to see us look at that closely.
I think that's a good point, mainly because if you look at Asheville, they even have a technology tax.
No kidding.
Yeah, on their invoices, they're charging for their cell and technology. I think.
Oh, well, we can't do that here.
We don't have to have that
No.
before.
But I would like, if you don't mind, to have you look at what it would take to get some type of a tourist tax to help
That'd be
out.
a part of the sales tax, right?
I've researched this, and the last I looked, it was a couple of years ago at the state site. The state maximum is 7.5 cents retail sales tax, okay? And we're at 6.75 right now.
That's soon to increase.
Huh?
That's soon to increase.
That's going up. They just passed that.
75.
Yeah, it'll be 7%.
Yeah, it'll go to 7, right, but, and I got that. But the max is 7.5 that's allowed. And it doesn't have to be the county only. A municipality can have a local retail sales tax. And I talked to Chris before he left. I mentioned it a couple of times to you. And we could do that. We could apply for it. Yes, the state has to approve it. But a local retail sales tax would be borne greatly by the tourist
Right.
as opposed to the residents. Not many residents really shop here in town, to be realistic. And the revenue that could be generated by that is just really unbelievable, so.
That's probably another thing that would be pretty easy to peg, what the revenue would actually be, wouldn't it? Couldn't we,
We can make some estimates. One thing you've got to look at is the commercial shopping opportunities, because I know certain things are exempt.
Right.
So we would have to take that into account. You also have to make sure that your political landscape is agreeable, and that's on the state level, not the local level. So there'd be a lot of work, but I mean, we can certainly put some things together.
But the bulk of it, for this area, would come out of Ingalls, actually. I mean, a good part of it
Yeah,
would come
I'm
out of Ingalls.
thinking
And there's
about
certain
the
food items that aren't.
food items that aren't, but you look
Different
around
things,
and,
right.
certainly Chimney Rock would
Yeah.
would
Now,
do
that
well.
wouldn't help us.
It wouldn't help us.
Because
And
you're
so that's
talking
why I
local
wonder
limits only.
how much we would actually get or be able to raise through that method.
Would you mind looking at Asheville and Hendersonville and giving us what their taxes are as far as what those are? I just
Sales tax or?
Sales tax and what their special fees are or whatever for their tourists. Because I know they've got a couple of them or one or two of them.
If I recall, one of our discussions we had up here, Dan Brenneman presented you with a copy of a page with 16 different taxing options. Do you still have that? Do you recall?
Yes, and most of them we were already doing or taking advantage of.
Well, the ones that we aren't doing, let's look at. Even the ones we are, let's
Some
look at if we can
some
do
weren't
it better.
applicable, yeah.
You know, or in a better way.
Just anything we can do helps our residents.
The town does not get anything back on the room tax. Is that correct?
TDA tax.
TDA?
TDA, that's correct.
Don't get anything.
It goes to the states allocated back to your TDA, yeah.
There's no option to get any of that back, I guess.
Because,
Yeah, it goes to tourism development, yep,
We would have to have our own development
We would have to have our
association
own,
in order to
yeah.
have that.
that's right.
Yeah. Is that something we should look at?
For the amount of money, I'm not sure.
I think it's maxed out too, isn't Didn't they max it out with the last increase?
I don't know. I'd have to check.
Yes, I think they did.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, when I was on chamber board, I believe their income's $700,000 a year, and at that time, 83% of that came from us. I think it's down a little bit to about 70%. So you'd be looking at about 400,000 plus if we broke away and did our own TDA. For information.
So is that an option? We could have our own TDA and get that
I think that's another state thing that you gotta,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah,
problem
we-
is now they're gonna go Rutherfordton first, and that's a political type thing.
Let us look into it. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, TDA or CDA, community development, yeah. Oh.
But yeah, there's some money there.
There's also, we talked the other day, you and I and the mayor, about an MSD, Municipal Service District. And that's an option. Now, whatever district you set up, whether the district be the boundaries of the lake or a boundary so far off the shoreline of the lake, or it's just the commercial district, whatever, you can set those up and they draw extra revenue and taxation from those districts.
Yeah, and
Whatever.
we did research that a little. Of course, you're dealing with a shorter or a smaller population, so your tax revenue isn't as great as you would if it was all across the board. So we went with the across the board instead of breaking it up. But there are some possibilities there, I think.
Yeah. And if it takes legislation, of course, nothing ventured, nothing gained. If you don't ever start somewhere, you'll never get there. So you gotta be bold to make that first step or two.
We appreciate the hard work there.
Yeah.
for
Thank you.
everybody, all staff.
I would say-
Thank you.
Say that, it's well done, well done.
Thank you.
So, taking a look forward at our process, and then we can move into the next item on the agenda, which is to set the next special meeting to follow up on this, when we've all had a better chance to study it and, dive into it with you. How do you see this unfolding? Just give us you've done this obviously a lot as a town manager. We know what the end goal is to meet and adopt a final budget before the end of June, right?
That's great. Yeah, so just in following with your calendar, you have roughly, 3 weeks to meet as often as you like before the public hearing, which is, you said, in June. And then you'll have another 2 or 3 weeks before the end of the year, our fiscal year, July 1st, to adopt the budget. Normally, we hold at least 2 special meetings, historically, I guess. One is to discuss with department heads, one is to sort of wrap things up. Really, from this point until your public hearing, what I would like to hear from the board, town council, is what you would like for me to present during that public hearing. Certainly, 12.5 cents will be hard to stomach. And as you look through, what some of those costs would be per month or per year for folks, as you get up into this range, it does look a little tougher. You may come back and say, Ron, we want you to go ahead and present it, and these are the things that we are interested in going ahead and removing from the budget in order to bring that number down. But certainly, just by looking at all of these numbers for the last, few weeks, 3 cents, 4 cents seems entirely reasonable and almost, must have for the dam project. So you can sort of use that as a guide if you'd like. That's just some calculations based on what an average homeowner, 300,000 is what I picked. You could pick whatever you'd like, would pay in additional taxes for that. So again, what would be helpful for me is to hear what you would like for me to present at your public hearing. So if you have ideas that you want to go ahead and meet again and talk, so that I can get that ready in time for that public hearing.
Is that little summary table in this book somewhere?
It's not. I was going to type it up and send it out to you today, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Well, but that's an exact 13-cent increase as opposed to the 12 point whatever.
Right, I just rounded it. I mean,
Yeah.
I took the 40.
Last number.
It's 403, sorry, you're right. It's 403, so I'll fix that.
Ron, if you would make one more column on that, showing the increases as a percentage over what's being paid now.
When do we want to try next week to get together?
That's
Well-
where we get into here on the next.
Let's see, 23rd.
So Ron, you're thinking maybe at least one more meeting before the public hearing, which would be on the second Tuesday, right?
Right, normally we would meet with department heads prior to that, so we've done that in the past.
How do we all feel about that, department head presentations and meetings? Is that something?
Well, usually
You wanna see that?
we've always sat down with them and gone through their individual department budget.
Okay.
Because that way they know what we're thinking too.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll caution you is with this budget, try to stay out of the details, because you can nickel and dime yourself to death with $1,000 here, and it's not going to meet the big numbers that you're going to need. So, I would suggest that you stick towards those larger numbers when you're looking at. You're, of course, welcome to look at all the details. I know you will. But as you get to it, just don't get lost in it. It's easy to do.
Hey,
One thing
it's
that-
$100, and I think it shouldn't be there. I'm gonna talk about it.
Yeah.
One year, this might have been just maybe the second or third year I was on council, we had it looked like we were gonna, the best that the budget could get was about a 2 cent sales tax or something like that. I mean, it's 2 cents property tax increase. And we said, go back to each of the departments, and whatever that percentage was, tell us if you can reduce your budget by that much and make it work. And everybody did. So
Oh, you
I
can do
guess
it.
it might be,
We may end up shuffling papers all day long, but we could do it.
this didn't require any shuffling papers. It was, this might be the approach, say, look, we got your budget here, we know there's a degree to the urgency of every request. We're not gonna be able to operate if we don't have this that'd be nice to have, but we're not absolutely needed. And give us their bare bones, this is what I really need for next year, knowing that we've got these two big expenses coming down the pipe that we have to address. So look, everybody's part of the team. Let's see what we can do. What can you do? You absolutely have to have this car or this piece of equipment or whatever, and just give us an alternative from that perspective. Can we do that?
We certainly can.
Okay. All right.
I would like to recommend 23rd, 24th, or 25th.
I'm going to be out of town all next week.
Okay, how about 30th, 31st, or 1st?
I mean, I can do it by phone or something if we need to, try to.
That's all right.
We can do it 30th, that's a Wednesday.
I can do it the 30th.
30th is fine with me.
30th is good for me.
Wow.
How about that? It's just that quick.
Start at 9 again and until? And we do all the department heads and fire departments?
So you want everyone here?
Well, not all at the same time. Try
I
to
know.
schedule.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so they're not sitting in here all day, some of them.
In fact, if you got one at the plate and one on deck, you can call the one that's in the hole when the first one finishes.
So 9 a.m. on the 30th, I make a motion that we hold a special budget meeting on the 30th of May at 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock,
At this
all right.
location.
We have the motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Cameron seconds it. All those in favor,
Oh, go ahead.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
For that meeting, I would like to see, since we're gonna do fire departments first, and you told us they asked for more than what you put allowed in here, I'd like to see their budget request, because again, I would like to ask them what might have been cut out that they could not absolutely, or could live without and could not live without. So I'd like to see those for the fire departments. In line with what John said, I would like to ask the departments to individually, right now, before that meeting, go through and cut a straight 10% out of their department budget and see what they come up with, just as a hypothetical.
Yeah, that's really, I think, what we did the last time.
You did.
Everybody just
10%
did it as
across
a
the board,
percentage.
you did.
Yeah.
You did 10% across the board.
How long do we anticipate that we will be here on the 30th?
I'd say it's
All
like
day.
last one.
Okay.
It was at least,
9 to
It's
5?
gonna be until
Okay.
noon at least.
I'd say,
After one
say
or
at least
two.
1 o'clock.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ron? About 1 o'clock? I'm just doing my calendar, that's the only,
At least, right, that'd be,
if at least, I'm just gonna do
Yeah.
the whole day then.
At least
I'm
3
gonna
hours.
plan- I'm gonna plan all day on that.
Would we take a recess for lunch possibly, or would we just keep on going?
I'd like to keep going. I mean,
All right.
Yeah.
Have
Okay. We're gonna bring our,
have something
Yeah,
brought
bring
in.
lunch or something.
I'd say we have something brought in 15 minutes or
could we,
something.
That's what we've done before.
could we
and
do
that's-
that,
yeah.
Ron? Or have a lunch brought in so we can just take a quick break, get it, and keep going?
It might be good to set us up a table that just works like, especially department heads and all coming in, it's less formal and it just makes a better flow of information, I think.
Okay.
Good idea.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, is there anything else on our plate? Have a motion for adjournment?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Commissioner Cameron, a second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Weber. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
All right.
Thank you, Ryan. I know there's a lot of-
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, sir.